Namaste. Sadhanapanchakam, verse 3. Vakyarthascha vicharyatam srudishirah paksha samashriyyatam dustarkat suviramyatam srudimatastarkonusandhiyatam brahmasmidi vibhavyatam aharahargarvah parityajyatam देहेहम् अधिरुच्यतं बुधजनैर्वादः परित्यज्यताम्. In Sadhana Panchakam, through these 5 verses, Shankara enumerates some 40 items that constitute the Vedantic sadhana. Last classes we discussed 16 items. Today we start from 17th point. Reflect ever upon the meaning of the Upanishadic commandments and take refuge in the truth of Brahman. Avoid perverse arguments but follow the discriminative rationale of the Shruti. Always be absorbed in the attitude, I am Brahman. Renounce pride. Give up the delusory misconception, I am the body. Give up totally the tendency to argue with wise men. Number 17. Constantly reflect upon the meaning of the Upanishadic commandments. We have 4 pithy statements which are considered by the rishis as the very commandments, and in their embrace they hold the entire spiritual wisdom of the Vedas. They are: number 1, the definition of truth, Prajnanam Brahma. That means consciousness is Brahman. Number 2, the statement of advice, Tattvam Asi. That means that thou art. Number 3, the statement of direct experience, I am Atma Brahma. That means this Atman is Brahman. Number 4, the roar of realization, Aham Brahmasmi. That means I am Brahman. All of them in their togetherness uplift a mind that is steadily contemplating upon this deeper and subtler implication. Consciousness is the one life spark that plays through all creatures, and this is the God, the Lord, the one substratum from which the universe has risen, in which the universe exists and plays, and into which alone ultimately all names and forms merge. This consciousness in you is your own true nature. This is the essential subject. All the rest are its objects, perceived. It alone is the perceiving light of consciousness, the self. The meditator must come to experience for himself in moments of deep and total meditation that he is not the body mind intellect complex, but this self in me is the one self everywhere. After this depth awakening, the sense of individuality ends and the realized seeker roars in the silence of his fulfillment. I am Brahman. Shankara prescribes that students of Vedanta should constantly reflect upon the untold significances of these four great commandments. Number 18. And take refuge in the truth of Brahman. As limited mortal individuals, we are now recognizing ourselves to be the body and mind. As an ego, the individualized self pants to rediscover its own apparently lost peace and bliss by acquiring, possessing, embracing, and enjoying the world of sense objects outside. A true seeker should constantly take refuge, even if he has no direct experience, in the thought that I am not this body, and live in the silent attitude that I am the one self. Divorce the body mind intellect mistress and get wedded to the self within, which is the one self everywhere. Number 19. Avoid perverse arguments. Arguments can be extremely constructive and also completely destructive. Right arguments can throw more and more light upon the path to be pursued and the goal to be reached, and wrong arguments can bring in confusing banks of mists, blinding our path and wheeling our goal. Avoid such unnecessary perverse arguments raised by people who have no faith in the Upanishads. No subtlety of perception to feel the unseen Lord playing all around us at all times. This needs sensitivity and an inner equipment reduced by its passion, and lesters will not have the necessary equipoise to dictate the play of the ultimate reality. Number 20. Certainly follow the discriminative rationale of the Shruti, while avoiding the perverse logic and false arguments. It is not meant to say that we have no arguments and logical reasoning processes to prove the self within to our own intellectual satisfaction. Vedanta is a rational process of intellection. We must learn to think and argue along the line of discussion indicated by the Upanishads. The sequence of arguments by which the rishis deny the five sheaths, the reason arrayed to examine the three states of consciousness, the logical thought process elaborated in the Upanishads to show the one changeless self, the sole substratum for the universe of multiplicity, and change all this can immensely help a student of purified intellect to have forward and wake to the dimensionless state of pure consciousness divine. Number 21. Be absorbed in the attitude I am Brahman. As we are, we live in the assumption that we are the limited ego, tyrannized by our equipments, shamelessly struggling to eke out our happiness from the world outside. We have lived in this false notion for such a long time that any amount of study, our reflection cannot end our tendency to consider us as a helpless, hapless ego. The only antidote for this wrong attitude to the unwind them by the nobler and self recreative attitude that I am Brahman. As the timeless self, I am not the body, mind, intellect, equipments, and so I have none of their imperfection or sorrows, birth, death, health, ill health, the ashramas, the varnas, the species, the castes, color distinctions are all based upon and with reference to the body. Joy and sorrow experiences are determined by the mind. And as I am not the mind, they too are not mine at any time. The intellectual restlessness are not mine, as I am not the intellect. To keep the attitude that I am Brahman under all sets of circumstances is to bring an indomitable amount of equipoise and joy, balance and bliss into our inner life. Number 22. Renounce pride. Out of identification with the body and possession comes the exaggerated sense of self importance, accompanied always by a demeaning irreverence to all others. These factors together create pride. It is essentially a false attitude of the ego when it is identified with the limited matter layers around it. To renounce this pride and its baser tendencies is to surrender to the self in one's own heart. Number 23. Give up the idea I am the body. I am the body attitude is natural, as we had already lived thus through billions of years during our slow evolutionary progress from the lesser equipments as plants and then as animals. In these lower states, the sole dharma was to maintain the attitude that I am the body. because nature had not yet completed her work of polishing and improving the physical structures and their functions. Now we have fully reached the noble anatomical structure and the perfect psychological functioning of the human form. Hereafter, self preservation is not through the body, it becomes preservation of the beauty, grace, and glory of the self. The body of man is meant only for the service of others. Paropakararthamidam shariram. Your body is not meant for you. It is an efficient tool to serve others. Our job now is to purify the mind, intellect, equipment, and transcend them so that we directly come to experience the supreme state of pure consciousness, the God state. Therefore, give up the empty false idea I am the body. Number 24. Give up arguments with the wise. We approach men of direct experience and men of scriptural knowledge for our own benefit. We are not obliging them. They are not gaining anything by teaching us the glory and nature of the self. It is not they who benefit when they patiently explain and encourage us to reach the self. It is entirely our gain. They are people who have already fulfilled their life. Out of mere compassion at our suffering, they stir about to instruct, inspire, and guide us. By our gross arguments, we should not try to block this flood to their love sweeping down to bathe us in joy and happiness.